from Blue Origin, but we will start with our introductions. And once again, just appreciate the participation today. This conversation is certainly enlightening from a lot of areas of focus within aerospace, a lot of important and key topics that I'm sure resonate with the greater A&D market. Appreciate your contributions in this. We are recording it. We'll make it available to you after the session today. If you do have any questions, feel free to use the chat. I hope to save a few minutes at the end for your questions. If we don't get to them, we'll circulate them to the panelists and respond. My name is Lonnie Kiefer. I'm one of the co-founders at SmartCert, and I'll be moderating the panel discussion today. We'll do quick intros with our panelists, starting with Rob.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those of you that are out and abroad. Rob Seuss, I'm Vice President of Global Sales at ILS. Very excited to be here. Lonnie, thank you so much for having me.
To have you. Fred.
Hi, my name is Fred Short. I'm Chief Growth Officer for FDH Aero. FDH Aero is a aerospace distribution and supply chain company, operates globally around the world, and supports both OEM and aftermarket production.
Thanks, Fred. Dan.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dan Hopkins. I'm the SVP of Public Sector at Resolink. In my job, I'm responsible for selling both to the federal government and aerospace and defense. Resolink is a leading AI provider for enterprise software that illuminates supply chain risk, manages compliance, and also provides insights and opportunities to ensure supply chain is resilient and maintains risk.
Great. Damien.
Thanks, Lonnie. Damien Buist. I'm the Exec for Materials Strategy Initiatives. It's not easy to say for GE Aerospace. It has two parts to the role. I am the external facing member of the Aviation Supply Chain Integrity Coalition, helping grow understanding of the coalition, implement the recommendations while concurrently implementing those recommendations with the team here in GE Aerospace. So happy to be here today. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you all. I'm going to stop sharing to start our conversation. Have a couple questions. I think the three major themes, traceability, counterfeit parts, and the world of data and AI as that is so quickly transforming before our eyes. So we'll kick it off on the traceability side of things. Fred, I'm actually going to tee this question up to you and have a few others contribute, but let's talk a little bit about what you see as the biggest opportunities for traceability in reducing risk and friction in the aerospace supply chain.
Okay, from my perspective, I have many years, 30 plus years in the industry, supporting whether it's production or aftermarket. As important as good parts, quality parts is paperwork and traceability. And because that is just as important, you can stop a production line, you can hold up a valuable aircraft in a maintenance cycle without that correct certification. And I see the reducing friction in that aspect is very beneficial to everybody. Time is money. You can't fit that part without the right certification. And we all live and work in this industry. All our families fly an aircraft, so we want good product going on that aircraft. I guess that sort of sneaks into counterfeit parts, but essentially, the friction within the supply chain is huge. And it's difficult enough to get the parts without actually worrying about the certification going alongside it.
Very, very true there. Rob, what would you add to that?
Yeah, no, I'd echo everything that Fred mentioned there before. Anybody who has taken the time to source a part, as Fred said, certainly challenging, first of all, to locate the part, which I'm proud to be a part of in my current role at ILS. But just having been in the industry for as long as I have, whether with an OEM or on the MRO side or what have you, there's so much time that goes into locating the part only to have a lag or increased friction, as you had said, as it relates to the paperwork review process. More often than not, most people are aware that there's an initial intake paperwork review sometimes even required a down the hall or sharing of documentation to get that second look, right? So anything that we can do to remove that friction, anybody who has dug through a pallet of banker boxes, whether they're reviewing the acquisition of an airframe or an engine, will be laughing possibly or crying alongside with me here today as we talk about the friction that comes with documentation. So absolutely.
I would echo that. A
Yeah.
lot of what we hear is the departmental silos contribute to the challenges and the bottlenecks within workflows that increase that friction as well. So centralization, getting rid of paper, those areas definitely can make an impact and reduce the challenges and risks associated with receiving in parts and sourcing parts. Dan, anything you'd add there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. First of all, agree with Fred and Rob on what they've already shared. But look, I think that what we're seeing in supply chain in general is the most change that we've perhaps seen in the last 20 to 30 years. And part of that is, yes, it's technical. There's a lot of new innovation that's making its way into supply chain that just gives us better access to data, greater illumination into our suppliers and risk. And that might also make its way into finding alternatives for particular parts. But what we're seeing right now is a geopolitical change, a change from what used to be sort of considered as free trade to managed trade. And so that great realignment is really the opportunity for organizations to really, for probably the first time ever, to start to illuminate all vendors and suppliers within their supply chain because there's strong incentives to do so. And in fact, in some ways, in many new emerging policy areas, there are requirements to know who's in your supply chain. And so really the opportunity for us here is to think about how we might be able to better understand the world of suppliers, what they do, who they are, who they're owned by, what's their reputation. There's technology that now, for the first time ever, gives us that greater view to surface those organizations so that we have really good understanding, even in terms of new product introduction, of who we're doing business with down and across the supply chain. And so that's giving us an opportunity to really be able to manage those parts and those suppliers, to know who we're getting our parts from, and also to understand if we need to make changes, who those best likely suppliers are. And then finally, what I'll say is, since as you talked about the biggest opportunities, is also alignment across the organization. Many folks within supply chain, especially risk, it's usually considered a pretty small part of the organization. Yet there's so many new demands that are being put on us. I've yet to meet a department that's growing heads and tails with all of those demands. But really, these functions touch compliance, it touches legal, it touches engineering. And so now when we're thinking about traceability in products, it's an opportunity to do it right and align all aspects of the organization that really do care about all of these things and have a vested impact on getting it right.
That's excellent. Shifting a little bit, Damien. So the ASCIC created a comprehensive digital path for the A&D supply chain with short-term and long-term goals and targets for the industry to increase supply chain security. To you, what are the most urgent challenges as we move to make our supply chains more secure?
Thanks, Lonnie. I think the Aviation Supply Chain Integrity Coalition, or ASIC, as you mentioned, did a great job of conducting an investigation and developing recommendations that highlight these challenges. But I think the most urgent challenges, to your point, are around what they described as the short-term recommendations. And they, I guess, align with what the gentleman has said here, but strengthening vendor accreditation, ensuring we're prioritizing the use of accredited suppliers, developing feedback loops between parts installers and accreditors, expanding the use of digital arcs and the accompanying validation tools. And I think we spoke briefly about technology in May a little later, but there are many opportunities in various fashions, from AI to potentially distributed ledger networks that may assist there. And last but not least is further strengthening our training programs, our processes, best practices, with particularly our purchasing and receiving teams, who are our frontline of defense, and we to be sure ensure we're supporting them. And in line with that and supporting that is better verification and auditing of our scrap processes, right through to where these parts are destroyed. So it is really wrapped up in the recommendations, the short-term recommendations, which, as you saw, I think we released an update in Montreal a week or so ago. And there's a lot of progress being made by various organizations in starting to move forward with those recommendations.
Wonderful. Fred, I'm going to tee it up for you. It's easier for big industry players to add platforms and go digital, but how do we engage sub-tier suppliers? We know that if it's too costly or too complicated, they'll be less likely to participate. So how do we solve for this?
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, the big guys will be investing in this technology as we move along. This development, they'll flow it down, and then there comes a point where if we look at in the products that we supply, there's thousands of suppliers, manufacturers who are, you know, 15 employees provided support to an aircraft manufacturer for 60 or 100 years. They've got really no ability to invest in that technology. What I hope is that the industry in itself will support those suppliers so they don't go out of business. And then there'll be some sort of integrator on the digital flow down of requirements, because I think it's inevitable. The industry needs this, and it's going to happen, and we have to follow what the big OEMs are doing, and we need to make the industry safer, more resilient for sure, and maybe in our business as an integrator, as a supply chain company, maybe we could be the facilitator for that digital network for those manufacturers. It's hard to say at this point in time, but I think the adoption will be inevitable.
I would agree with that. I'm at the ATA e-business forum this week, and a lot of conversations are around the challenges in moving out of antiquated processes and being able to communicate and collaborate with your supply chain. I think overall, meeting everyone where they're at is a critical step. There are many who are far behind and others who lead the industry. So bridging the gap will probably be dependent on us all on this call, and making sure that everybody has access to the kind of tools and technology that are going to help build more trust and reliability in the supply chain, but also help them advance their business as well. So I'd say that's a critical focus for
Yeah,
all of us.
I wouldn't have thought any of the manufacturers that deal in this industry wouldn't support this or want to do it. It's an affordability side of things, which, I think
Right.
that's where the challenge will be, but we'll find a solution because it's a better system.
That's right.
Fred, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
Fred, I'll go one step further and say it's not only a cost issue, but also a change management issue, right? Anytime a new technology or a new process is brought into an organization, one of the things that we've learned along the way is that process change brings about some degree of nervousness amongst the members that are affected. A lot of times people want to do things the way they have always done them because it ensures their role within the organization, when in fact, technologies, whether it be AI, which Lonnie, I'm sure we're going to get to eventually, or document review or document integration, streamlining the processes that we're talking about here today, can unlock such incredible value to be able to then turn around and take that free time to be able to develop the relationships that one of my peers here had mentioned earlier about developing those relationships that are absolutely critical for the small players and large players to ultimately be successful. So the more that we are able to position these solutions and removing these frictions as a freeing of resources, whether it's through value stream mapping or just increased engagement with our mutual customers, I think from there, repositioning the solution through a different series of optics, I think we'll get greater uptake and get the buy-in from the budgetary standpoint that Fred mentioned.
Yeah. And Rob's absolutely right. I mean, look, the only way that you're going to have true verifiability of part to sites and who your suppliers are is through a supplier engagement.
Yeah.
AI can take you a long way in terms of having a probabilistic idea of who's in your supply chain, but at the end of the day, you need collaboration with those suppliers. And so look, the OEMs are really going to have to take the lead here, right? They're the ones that have the requirements to understand who's in their supply chain, in some instances, all the way down to source materials. So it's really a question about how can we engage our suppliers and bring them onto a platform and do it in a way that establishes a direct relationship with those suppliers, that's cost effective, i.e., removing those barriers of participation for suppliers almost in a free way to get them engaged in the portal to solicit the information that you need. And so that you have more of a community of those suppliers and that you're working together. And suppliers, quite frankly, they're going to have to realize that the world has changed. Yes, it's their proprietary data and their network. Yes, we know. But in instances where the OEMs have to understand who's in their supply chain basis, there needs to be a way to collaborate, to share that in a trusted manner, so that these big OEMs can make sure that they're maintaining compliance and have awareness and removing some of the risk from the supply chain. And so this is the opportunity that we find ourselves with today. It's a moment of great collaboration. You see it across multiple different industries, but it won't change overnight. But yet the technology is there to sort of help us move in the right direction, as industry combined.
Agree. And Calvin, thank you for joining us. Calvin's the Senior Director of Supply Chain and Logistics at Blue Origin. This is an appropriate question for you as well. We're talking a little bit about that digitization that the industry is embracing slowly but surely, and how we engage sub-tier suppliers. So welcome your feedback on that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's very timely, actually. We're just having a conversation about how we need to see more deeply into our supply chain in general. This is a known risk. Obviously, we have difficulty understanding the on-time delivery and expected quality of inbound componentry in a design to build and just-in-time manufacturing environment, like many aerospace, related companies are. It's really important that you get the right part the first time. We just don't have the schedule slack to be able to put up with parts that are late and parts that are coming in wrong. So definitely being able to see those things coming and stopping quality that is non-conforming in its tracks so that it can be fixed where that quality defect was created is extremely important. Blue Origin is definitely working to find solutions that allow us the opportunity to have our suppliers submit their quality data packages, before the parts even ship, and then effectively getting the all clear using some of the smart cert technologies that allow us to evaluate those documentation packages and effectively the quality of those parts before they ship. Right now, the largest quantity of non-conformances that we see for supplier parts is actually found at the dock after the parts are already late and have to sit inside of a queue only to be found non-conforming. And then they go into another queue, which is overflowing. Our capacity within that cell or those cells is insufficient to keep up with everything that's coming in. And effectively, then we figure out what's specifically wrong with those components, and then go into other queues throughout the business to identify an appropriate disposition. So mind you, all of those suppliers have already billed us for those parts because in their mind, they are good. And you run up against a timeline for your net payment terms, and effectively that dilemma places you in. You haven't proven to them why their parts aren't bad by that point before you have to uphold your on-timely payment expectation. So anyway, it's like I said, it's a very timely conversation that you bring that up today, but that's a real problem that we're fighting with here now.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I think Calvin's explained all the waste in our industry in one session.
Yeah, that's right.
Everything was there.
Great examples for sure. Let's move on to, sorry.
If I can just add, sorry, but yeah,
Yes, please.
as an OEM, who is looking at implementing some of these solutions. I just wanted to highlight that, at least from
Yeah.
my perspective. I'm very cognizant and aware of that particular concept that smaller suppliers will need to have accessibility, and that is a question whenever I'm out speaking or in public that I am asked these days. And that, whether that be direct through to us, whether it be through some form of clearinghouse, I guess that is to be determined. And an example being, Boeing, who are releasing an E8130 at the moment, are using clearinghouse organizations for some suppliers to be able to access that capability. I do want to highlight, though, that the coalition recommendations, and as I said, I sort of sit in two hats, GE Aerospace and the coalition. Those recommendations are performance-based, they're tool agnostic, and they're voluntary. And so some of those recommendations of the 13 can be implemented without significant outlay. And they're the ones that I guess I've also guiding some of the small organizations to have a look at and see what they can do immediately. Again, they are voluntary though.
Wonderful. Let's continue on that conversation, Damien. You mentioned the coalition report, and there's conversations around supply chain security. So what's standing out most to you, and what does it signal for how the industry needs to respond as it relates to counterfeit parts?
It's a really interesting question, Lonnie. I've had the opportunity over the past couple of months. I've only been in the role now 4 months, so spending a lot of time at both GE and external MROs, new make facilities, repair sites, having a look at the broader picture. We call it going to Gemba, so being at the place of work. But what particularly stood out to me was some of the gaps in our management of non-serialized parts and scrap. They were the key areas that sort of focused on and saw major concern. The majority of the parts that were sold by AOG Technics, who was the organization that supplied these parts with fraudulent documentation, which led to the coalition's creation, they were non-serialized, and many appear to have been scrapped. So, it also surprises me how many engine parts I alone see on eBay. I don't know whether you've had a look at eBay lately and had a look at how many engine parts just appear there. I have had the opportunity, as I said, to visit many of those MROs, and we all seem to manage scrap slightly differently with varying degrees of process, security, and I do believe there's immediate opportunity to tighten these processes, tighten security and validate destruction in a better way. As the AOG Technics issue is not an isolated issue. Many of the organizations, including ourselves that I speak to, see suspected unapproved parts, or SUP as we call it, on a daily and weekly basis. Other things we can do include tightening the use, as we spoke about before, of accredited suppliers, better training our frontline people as a key line of defense. So that was what jumped out at me just a couple of months into the role. Obviously, that may evolve over time, but yes.
Rob, in your view, which measures will have the greatest impact in combating counterfeit risk? Technology, collaboration, policy, or is it a combination of all three?
I think it's obviously going to be a combination of all three, because as the rules or as the community increases our communication and collaboration around these things, let's face it, our adversaries that are on the other side of this discussion are also ramping up their capabilities. If you go back to the particular issue that Damien mentioned that kicked off the ASCIC coalition, is their advancement in being able to produce the paperwork, their ability to find the parts, their ability to penetrate multiple OEMs, security protocols to be able to get into those networks is relatively amazing. And so I think it's a coalition of all of those things that absolutely has to happen. The other thing that Damien mentioned that I'm really excited about is the agnostic aspect of the coalition. I think that's really important. For too many years, many of the OEMs and other private companies, I think, have always tried to find their own private solution to this, because they either want control of the information or they want control of the platform and what have you. So I really commend what ASCIC is doing. I can absolutely tie into that to what we're trying to do here at ILS. We try and remain agnostic. We are a proud partner with SmartCert in providing and showcasing all of the capabilities they have with those suppliers that are utilizing the technology. So bravo. But we also create that agnostic space for, regardless of the technology, that agnostic mindset that he was talking about before, you can bring whatever solution you want, right, to our platform and be able to drive a lot of the similar benefits that we're trying to achieve here. Beyond all of that, one of the things that I've been very vocal about for a very long time is community. One of the phrases I like to use here is, if you see something, say something. Bring it to bring it to the attention of the community through other partners in the supply chain, through other OEMs, through LinkedIn and what have you, either privately and or very publicly. But let's shine a light on those bad actors that are in the supply chain, to let everybody know about how they're behaving, because it impacts all of us on a fundamental business basis. But more importantly, is this industry takes care of all of our loved ones in terms of where they're going for work, whether you're traveling abroad or you're going on PTO, hopefully. So
Appreciate that. Dan, I welcome you to weigh in.
Yeah, and I'll just simply add to Rob's really great point, which is, ultimately at the end of the day, there are suppliers that serve many of us within the industry. And it's really trying to look beyond what our internal organization knows and try to understand sort of what the industry knows. Who are the good actors within the space, right? Those are the known knowns, and then also uncover the known unknowns, right? So when I'm trying to assess risk, if we don't see this at an aggregate level across our industry, or there isn't a great understanding of risk for this particular supplier, then we're going to treat those suppliers differently. So it's really about, how do we come together as organizations within a particular industry to understand those suppliers that are either new, that are proven in standard, and try to make decisions not just based off of our own unique experience, but sort of the aggregated overall either scores of those organizations or those companies, or the fact that they are those trusted known knowns. And this is the opportunity that we have with AI, for instance, or data in general, is because it's not just about our internal sources. There's a wealth of information out there today on suppliers. There's a wealth of information out there about foreign ownership of those suppliers, where their parts and sites are. And there are third-party vendors that provide that, and there are great open source data sources too as well. And so being able to make those decisions and open that aperture to really help us better calculate and understand risk and the impact that those suppliers may have within our organization. We've never had a better opportunity now to incorporate that into our risk analysis and our decisions.
I love
It's
the
a,
known knowns comment. I love that.
I agree. It's a great
I would say
segue.
technology is definitely going to be the driver here, though, because
Right.
the whole supply chain, somebody mentioned the good actors, bad actors. I suppose that's a topical thing to talk about. They're all trying to serve their industry and do a good job, but technology will differentiate the people who are trying to do it incorrectly, or the people who are trying to comply with all the requirements in our industry. So if technology can be the differentiator, I think that's what will make the difference, because we have a community of suppliers, we have QPLs, we have authorized distributors, manufacturers for certain platforms. So it's our industry is very regulated, but maybe we need technology to be the differentiator.
I love that. And it was a perfect segue. So if we're talking about technology, I'll go back to SmartCert starting to get paper out of the box, and we're really moving into generating data to kind of provide the visibility and traceability companies need. So Fred, how do you see, the concepts of AI changing the way organizations detect and respond to risk when we think about the supply chain?
Well, our journey into AI is probably fairly basic at the moment, but I can see with what we've done so far, in terms of analyzing data and the recommendations AI makes in our organization now, it would be very simple to use a digital format of certification and AI certifying things on our behalf. I could see that happening, but we're at the beginning of that journey, I believe. But I think AI is such a powerful um, sort of network today that your life, everything you do, your kids talk about AI. You use AI every day when you're trying to construct things. It's going to be a major player in our industry, and along with your product, I think it will sort of streamline some of the workflows within our industry.
Appreciate that. Kelvin, anything you want to weigh in there as far as how technology is advancing and the use of AI?
Oh, well, certainly the marching orders that we have here is that AI is a term that should be included in every other sentence and sometimes multiple times in the same sentence. We literally cannot do enough in the form of AI work within what we're trying to accomplish here. So one of the partnerships that we're working with SmartCert on is trying to intelligently identify the good from the bad, without the requirement for a human to go in and make that initial disposition, right? So, like, that is one place in particular that we're trying to deploy it, but we're trying to deploy it everywhere. Everywhere there is human making decisions that are repetitively done is going to be fair game. It's perfectly situated within the supply chain overall for procurement, sourcing, order management, demand collaboration, general communication, all of those things. So yeah, it's very prevalent within our organization, and we're really excited. We have a very bullish outlook on its use over the next 6 to 18 months.
Great. Dan, let's talk a little bit about how the industry comes together to leverage AI with the oversight required to ensure compliance. What does that look like?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and AI does play a major role in finally being able to address some of these really serious concerns and issues, and now demands and requirements that are being put on the industry. If we talk about really sort of what every organization is dealing with, we got to make sure that we are complying with a whole host of new policies and regulations that we're seeing. And also some requirements that we're seeing across sort of not just import controls, but now export controls too as well. And sort of AI can definitely enable those unique functions, but it really all starts with mapping our supply chain. Most organizations simply don't know who's beyond their tier 1 providers. Maybe you have a good idea of tier 2, but certainly after tier 3, there's really no awareness. And so how can you really be able to comply with some of these regulations, or really collaborate with all of your suppliers, or understand how risky a tier 5 supplier might be into ensuring that you are being able to ship the thing that you need to ship if you have no awareness of those providers? And so the first and foremost part of where AI can really play a role, a very valuable role, is getting as close to 100% possible of that mapping and providing verified mapping. Now, as an AI company, it might come as a shock to say that AI alone should not be depended on to verify those organizations within your supply chain. It should allow you to move faster, quicker, uncovering, I'll use the term again, the known unknowns, the areas of further due diligence that are required in your business. It should be used to accelerate that mapping, but then there's nothing better than being able to engage those suppliers directly. So going back to that earlier comment of how do we facilitate conversations with our third-party suppliers, now businesses are empowered to be able to do that. But AI certainly plays a big role. And as a community, what's really great is being able to say, hey, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? There are certain suppliers that are that serve our industry. And so being able to leverage AI surfaces those suppliers quickly and provides a sort of a known score for those suppliers that allows us to really focus on the areas where we don't have a lot of information and we need to do further due diligence. And then lastly, what I'll say is that most organizations, and this may come for a shock, is that when we're talking mostly to supply chain risk teams, believe it or not, sometimes those compliance teams aren't talking, right? So if organizations are trying to solve for, say, UFLPA, for instance, and they're busy getting all their supplier lists, sometimes the scrim teams don't always know that they put together a list of those suppliers. So this is an opportunity for collaboration. Also, the engineering teams have those certs for certified components that pre-smart cert live in those documents. Well, it turns out that you can actually that's very valuable information to be able to not only put into smart cert, but to use that in the mapping journey to map towards that 100%. So you can benefit by sort of the supplier graph of you, if you will, of the industry, but certainly taking the existing data sources that you have that you might not even think about allows you to reach that 100% sort of understanding of who's in your supply chain, and then unlock all of those additional use cases that really sort of get you into sort of that industry of the future.
Love it. Damien, anything you want to add to that?
I think Dan enunciated that pretty well, actually. And all I can say is that I agree immensely, because in the case of AAG Technics, it was the seventh tier supplier that we had the issue with. And we didn't identify that till after. So any tool or capability that can support the likes of ourselves getting to that seventh tier and beyond to be able to ensure the integrity of that supplier is immensely helpful and helps us manage risk in the industry.
Rob, that goes back to your conversation. As we get it more advanced with technology, we know our adversaries are doing the same. So creating more visibility into deep within documentation is a key aspect of that. What are your thoughts on AI?
So we've been a long proponent of AI. It's obviously the big buzzword here recently, but given the large data sets that we have at ILS, we've been using AI since the mid 20 teens, given the large data sets that we have. So we're pretty versed in AI and data analysis. Like everybody else, we are utilizing AI on an increasing basis to reduce all those repetitive human touches that we have throughout our entire organization. And frankly, there's so much opportunity to streamline those decisions and those opportunities that the question is which one do you tackle first? So I think it's a similar issue that many people have. I think the triangulation of the human touch component that we talked about, technology, as well as the relationships that our suppliers and ultimately the customers have together will bring the most robust solution for the industry as a whole. Again, solutions like yours, Smart Cert, allows the confidence for the ultimate end user to know that whether they are a first tier or a fifth tier supplier in the supply chain, they can have that increased confidence of the parts that are arriving at their dock, to not have that burgeoning UAP, non-conforming material hitting the dock before it goes into production, and bringing everything to a quick stop. So, yeah.
Appreciate that. Let's talk a little bit about the sub-tier supply chain. So we're talking about moving forward as an industry, but how can we better align incentives so that traceability and security initiatives benefit, the smaller guys, the mom and pops in the sub-tier supply chain? What does that look like? I welcome anyone to participate in this question.
I think part of that, Lonnie, goes to the accreditation side, and perhaps obviously we're evolving to more prioritization of accredited organizations. I am told that it is more challenging for mom and pop organizations to have some of those accreditations, and I think we possibly need to work with the likes of ASA and team to ensure that, and I'm sure they do already have elements that support that level. But for me, it's focus on having the right accreditation so I can actually have access and enable and support and use those particular suppliers.
Yes, incentives is an interesting word, because it's like an incentive is to be part of the supply chain. So you are accredited, and they all are today. So they've jumped through hoops to get there in, let's say, 20 years ago, with whatever hoops were required. And I see this as just the next phase of the development. I mean, yeah, they might struggle financially and they might need some assistance, but the incentivization is you will support this platform as long as you're approved and accredited. So I see the supply chain following here.
And we see similar things across our customer base. I think one interesting use case that we're also seeing is, as we have this great realignment of suppliers and new suppliers that are popping up, and and organizations having to consider different suppliers because of, say, the impact of tariffs. Discovery of alternative suppliers is becoming a really important use case, and one that suppliers are really eager to make sure that they can surface their capabilities and compliance and certification, in addition to meeting the material demands of our particular customers. So being part of a solution that sort of brings OEMs and suppliers, for lack of a better word, together, allows for just greater discovery of suppliers beyond just the what we're seeing as more of a necessity for award.
That's great. We're going to have a few minutes available for any questions if anyone listening in wants to add them to the chat. And then I have one question for each of you. So for those in the audience or someone that's going to watch this after the fact, though, where do I start? What's one actionable step they can take to begin improving traceability and data quality in their own organization? Rob, let's start with you.
Wow, that's a question, right? I think it's the basics really more than anything else. Not to get super advanced with looking at the next technology or trying to be a part of the next platform or trying to do everything all at once, right? Do the basics, do them really, really well. Develop those necessary relationships that we talked about before, and use that network to grow, right? Um, we're very focused here on accreditation and paperwork and technology. And I think some of the things that we've talked about today, whether it be the relationship component, whether it be the accreditation component, whether it be the utilization of technology, shameless plug for Smart Cert, right? And or AI or a combination thereof is ultimately going to allow those people to be able to be successful.
Appreciate that. Fred, any
I,
thoughts?
yeah, I would say that any organization measures waste today in terms of, non-value added activity, failure activity, their their internal reject cost, external reject costs. I think if you put that dollar amount next to the cost of embracing, digital technology and something like SmartCert, I think you would go quite a far towards justifying that technology moving forward. And we've got a lot of people in our organization who do a lot of value stream mapping, and you can see the waste when you do that quite easily in our organization. And I think just being open to technology and new things, which I think most of our people are, they're very open-minded. You can take the next step. And in terms of leadership, leadership's all about embracing the ideas of our people and taking it to the next level. And I feel we're doing that. I think we're living and breathing that today at FDH. So I'm sure our organization is no different to any of the other panelists or any other people listening. Just take the next step.
Fred, I'm going to piggyback on that if I can, and just say is I love the way you position that, right? So many business leaders look at the cost of doing something. I would take that, but almost also flip it on its head and say, what's the cost of not doing it,
Yeah,
right?
very pertinent, Rob. Yeah.
Damien.
It's going to be a little bit more specific, Lonnie, and I guess a shameless plug for the coalition. There's www.aviationsupplychainintegrity.com, coalition.com, which I can provide that later if anyone needs that. And that, have a look at the report, have a look at the 13 recommendations. Those recommendations are broken down into strengthening vendor accreditation, digitization and validation of documents, tracking of non-serialized and scrap parts, and they're broken down into short, 12 to 24 months, medium under 5 years, and greater than 5 years longer term in guiding us how we should be implementing those. And I think it's pretty much a roadmap on where you start and how you could actually work, at least from the counterfeit perspective, counterfeit part perspective, on how you can move forward in this. And also, my ask is to ensure that get the message out there, continue to talk about this amongst the industry. This is an industry issue that we all need to be talking about.
Appreciate that. Dan.
Sure. I think what's important is that a recognition that we all have ERP systems or PDM, and a lot of those existing systems are really built for purchasing, manufacturing, distribution. But what I think is really needed is to make sure that organizations have a system of record for all of their suppliers beyond even just the ones that they buy from, all of the tiers of suppliers that is in that ecosystem. And what that allows organizations to, beyond just being able to execute on all the really fantastic ideas and necessary and great ideas from the coalition, and as Damien just laid out, but it also allows organizations to create a system of intelligence, right? So if we're doing things from a compliance perspective, if we're trying to understand risk, if we're trying to do what if scenarios, if we're trying to understand, what's on Truth Social tomorrow and how that impacts us from a supply chain perspective, being able to sort of map your current state and do what if scenarios on your future state, and then also be able to understand where your risks are and be proactive, not just react faster, is sort of where the world is going. And the great thing about what SmartCert does that we especially love is that it allows organizations to be able to memorialize, take what's normally unstructured data, put it in structured formats so that it's actionable. That data allows us, as Resolink, to be able to map supply chains to move faster so that you have that critical verifiability of parts and sites within your supply chain so that it's much easier to maintain compliance. It's much easier to do scenario analysis. And really, at the end of the day, as the world continues to evolve and change, and new supply chain networks are built, really it's critical for organizations to be able to have a system that enables them to really operate in this new paradigm.
Calvin.
Yeah, absolutely. So we live in a world within space where traceability is the utmost importance. Those of us who have experienced a flight anomaly really truly understand what it means to have difficulty understanding what componentry, what specific occurrence of componentry flew on those particular vehicles. So you were trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again in situations like that. And anything that makes that easier is going to have great value, especially for other companies like Blue or SpaceX or any of the other number of companies that are popping up in that way. And the idea that you might be able to capture that in an earlier phase within the build cycle of these things, I think it was Damien, perhaps Rob or Dan mentioned the seventh tier, of your manufacturing supply chain. And, I would say that we have had a difficult time getting into the deeper tiers. We are probably stuck in the first and second tier. And we are actively working to digitize our understanding of what that documentation and traceability looks like. And so, obviously we're really excited about the partnership and the opportunity where we're going to be able to see more deeply into that.
Right. For the companies that we talk to, even internally, if you're at the mercy of documentation as it comes into your suppliers and the way your customers ask for it, there's plenty that you can also do internally that helps break departmental silos and creates that centralization so that the data becomes more actionable, the access to documents reduce a lot of the bottlenecks internally. So even if you just look, and I know that some of you have mentioned that, turn the lens internally on making improvements and eliminating manual entry and human error, and creating sort of the foundation that will then translate to stronger supply chains and partnerships with your customers and your suppliers is also a great step in the right direction. We hear so often that, quality sales is at the mercy of, quality being able to share the status of things, or the review process for quality is I received this email and I'm going to print it out and walk it over to my quality manager. And all of those steps, when we think about the challenges it creates with the versioning history and where these documents live and who can access them, and how do we reduce not only the costs associated with our workflows, but how do we kind of shore up our internal teams so that when things are asked of us that are outside of our day-to-day, that we're ready for it. So I think there are small steps internally that companies can take as well. Looks like we have one question. So thanks, Lyndon, your contribution from Portugal this evening. He wrote, "This is a diverse group. What does your organization see as the greatest risk to their supply chain or to the industry in general?" Who'd like to kick that off?
I can start that off. I mean, the greatest risk today is capacity, but along with that, if the supply chain was more focused and streamlined, maybe capacity might not be a big an issue. But it's certainly challenged today. All of our businesses, wherever in the supply chain you sit, need to look at better ways of doing things, lean initiatives, technology to improve, manufacturing technology to improve as well. But we're certainly restricted in our industry today to supply the big guys with the product they need for the build rates they're predicting. So whether that be the Airbus of this world, Boeing, it's difficult to keep up with the supply chain demands.
There were some statistics shared yesterday at the ATA Business Forum related to the challenges in the labor market for all manufacturers, and that aviation as an industry is well behind. So even that impact, I think, it creates risk as far as output, just like you said, Fred.
Mm.
Yes, more specifically, though, on the suspected unapproved parts side, I can see a path with vendor management, digitization. I'm still struggling with a path on how we track, trace, non-serialized parts through our networks and the scrap of those parts. And that's something that if anything keeps me awake, that's something that keeps me awake at the moment, is how we move forward as an industry tracking, those level of parts, whether it through be visual, whether it through be batch number. I'm not quite sure yet. That's something I think we need to focus on, is how we track non-serialized parts right through from birth to destruction.
Mm.
There was a conversation yesterday by IATA specifically related to the e-ticket and the whole concept behind, regardless of if your flight is broken into different airlines, the e-ticket is the single source of truth. And so they were trying to think about a way to kind of create that back to birth traceability in a similar format. But I think, to your point, it is yet to be solved. Anyone else want to add to that? We've done great on time. Well, I want to thank each of you, Calvin, Fred, Damien, Rob, and Dan, and thanks to everyone for joining us. I think what we've heard today is that traceability, AI, and collaboration all come down to one thing, and that's connection. Connecting systems, suppliers, and data so we can move faster, reduce risk, and strengthen trust across the industry. It's clear that none of us can do this alone. It's going to take alignment across every tier of the supply chain to truly make digital traceability real. Thanks again to our panelists for the insights and to the audience for being part of this conversation. It's an exciting time to be shaping what comes next. I appreciate all of you.
Thanks, Lonnie.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
Annie.
for
Thank
the
you
opportunity.
all.
Nice to meet everybody.
Cheers.
Bye.